Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we are taking a close look at a recent malvertising campaign that affected almost 1 million devices globally.
Wow, that's a lot of devices.
That is a ton. And this wasn't just some random attack. It was super well planned out, and it used platforms that we all know and trust in ways you wouldn't expect.
It's a textbook example of how cybercriminals are upping their game. They're blending in more and more with the digital landscape and making their attacks even harder to spot.
Absolutely. And so for our listeners who might not be as familiar with the term malvertising, it's essentially using online ads to spread malware. And it's usually disguised as something you would actually want to click on.
Right, it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Exactly.
It might look harmless, but underneath it's dangerous.
So in this case, the sheep's clothing was on illegal streaming sites.
Oh yeah, you know those sites where you can watch all the new movies for free?
Precisely those ones.
They're often full of malicious ads, and this campaign took it a step further. They actually embedded the malvertising right into the movie frames.
Oh, wow. So you're just sitting there watching a movie and bam, you're infected.
That's how it works.
That's scary. But here's the twist.
Okay.
Instead of getting redirected to some shady website, users actually ended up on GitHub.
That's right, GitHub. You know, the platform where developers host their code?
Yeah.
These attackers, they took advantage of the trust we place in sites like GitHub because they knew we'd be less suspicious.
That is really sneaky. I mean, I use GitHub all the time for coding projects.
Yeah,
It's
really.
unsettling to think that I could accidentally download malware just from browsing code.
I hear you on that. It really highlights a crucial point. Nowhere online is truly 100% safe.
That is so true.
We have to be cautious everywhere,
Everywhere.
even on the platforms that we generally consider to be trustworthy.
This is why we love doing these deep dives.
Oh.
It's all about awareness, right? Making sure that you, the listener, know about these threats so you can stay protected.
Absolutely.
And speaking of protection, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Stonefly. Stonefly is a leader in enterprise storage backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions.
Wow, they do it all.
They do. And they offer something that is essential in today's threat landscape: air-gapped and immutable storage.
I was just reading about this. It's like having an actual digital fortress for your data.
It is.
It's completely isolated from the network and no one can tamper with it,
Yep.
even if attackers somehow get into your system.
Exactly. So if you're looking for secure ransomware-proof storage, then you've got to check out Stonefly Contact Sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo.
I might just do that myself.
Now back to this malvertising campaign. It was not a one-and-done attack. This was a multi-stage operation, almost like a digital spy mission.
I love that analogy.
So imagine
Okay.
the malware is a burglar.
Right.
First, it sneaks in through an unlocked window, so that's the illegal streaming site.
Gotcha.
And then it cases the joint, figures out, what valuables you have, what's worth stealing.
So that's that system scan that we talked about earlier, where the malware scans your device and collects information like your memory size, your graphics card operating system, your user accounts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really building up a profile of you and your machine.
Right. So the burglar has scoped out the place. What happens next?
Well, then it calls in the rest of the crew for the heist, and this is where things get really interesting. The attackers have a couple of options. Sometimes they drop a PowerShell script,
Okay.
which is basically a set of instructions that can automatically download and run other programs.
In this case, the program they were downloading was called Net Support RAT.
Yes, RAT stands for Remote Access Trojan.
So they're sneaking a Trojan horse onto my computer.
Good way to think about it.
Gosh.
This Net Support RAT, it gives them a backdoor into your system.
So they can see everything I'm doing.
Yep, they can steal your files. They can even control your webcam and a microphone.
It's giving me chills. It's like they're actually right there in the room with you watching everything you do. But you mentioned that there's another option.
Right. Sometimes instead of that PowerShell script, they'll drop an executable file.
Okay.
Think of it like a self-contained program that can run on its own. This executable then uses a clever trick to launch a hidden program that lets the attackers control your computer.
Okay, things are getting a little complicated here. Can you break it down a bit more? What is this hidden program all about?
Sure, it's called an auto IT interpreter.
Auto IT.
Auto IT is actually a legitimate scripting language that can automate tasks on Windows.
So it's meant for good, but they're twisting it and using it for bad.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not uncommon. And cybersecurity attackers are always finding ways to exploit legitimate tools.
Right, because those tools are already trusted by the system, so they're less likely to be flagged.
Exactly.
So this auto IT interpreter, it's running in the background, What does it actually do?
Well, think of it as a Swiss Army knife for hackers. It lets them do all sorts of sneaky things in the background, like spying on your browsing and stealing your files.
Wait, hold on. They can spy on my browser.
Potentially, yeah.
Like, they can see what websites I'm visiting, what I'm searching for.
Yeah, and they can also open up sensitive data files like your browser history, saved passwords, even documents you've been working on.
Okay, this is officially nightmare fuel. They're watching me, they're stealing my data, and I would probably have no idea it was even happening. This is why you need to be so careful online.
You're absolutely right. Awareness is key. The more you understand about these threats, the better you'll be able to protect yourself.
This is why I'm so glad we're doing this deep dive. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of how to defend against this kind of attack, I want to mention Stonefly again.
Good idea. Their solutions are really impressive.
They're air-gapped, and immutable storage are like having a digital vault for your most valuable information. It's offline, completely tamper-proof. So even if attackers do get into your system, they can't touch your data.
That's amazing.
It is. And with ransomware attacks on the rise, this kind of protection is more important than ever. So if you are serious about protecting your data, you need to check out Stonefly Contact Sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo.
I'll second that.
All right, so back to this malvertising campaign. You mentioned that this auto IT interpreter can do all sorts of shady things. Can you give us a few more details?
Sure. One of the key things it does is set up remote debugging on your web browser.
Remote debugging, what does that even mean?
Basically, it allows the attackers to connect to your browser remotely and see everything you're doing in real time.
So they could literally watch me browse the web.
Yeah.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
I never would have even thought of that as a threat.
It's a very subtle attack, but it can be extremely effective, and it gets even more unsettling.
Oh, don't tell me it gets worse.
Well, in addition to spying on your browsing, they can also use the auto IT interpreter to capture screenshots, steal files, and even execute additional PowerShell commands.
So they're basically taking over my entire device. At this point, they have access to everything.
Essentially, yes. They have the ability to see everything you do, access all your files, and even control your computer remotely.
Okay, I think I need a minute to process all of this.
Yeah.
It's pretty overwhelming to realize how vulnerable we are online.
I hear you. It's a lot to take in, but knowledge is power.
That's true.
The more you understand about these threats, the better prepared you'll be to defend yourself.
You're right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready to dive back in. Let's talk more about this auto IT interpreter and what else it can do. You mentioned capturing screenshots and stealing files. How exactly does that work?
Well, remember how we said auto IT is a scripting language?
Yeah.
That means that it can be used to write programs that automate tasks.
Right.
In this case, the attackers have written scripts that can take screenshots of your screen at regular intervals.
So they're basically recording everything I'm doing on my computer. That's creepy.
It is, and it can be very damaging, especially if you're working with sensitive information.
What about stealing files? How do they manage to do that?
They can use auto IT to write scripts that search for specific types of files, like documents, spreadsheets, images.
Okay.
Once they've found the files they're looking for, they can then upload them to a remote server controlled by the attackers.
So they're basically looting my computer, taking anything they think might be valuable. What kinds of things are they looking for?
It depends on the attacker's goals. They might be after financial information, like credit card numbers, bank account details, or they might be interested in personal information that they can use for identity theft.
Okay.
Or they might be targeting intellectual property, like confidential business documents or source code.
So it sounds like they're casting a wide net, trying to grab anything and everything they can get their hands on.
Exactly. They want to maximize their profits.
Right, of course.
So they'll try to steal as much data as possible.
This is getting really scary. It feels like we're completely at their mercy. Is there anything we can do to protect ourselves from this kind of attack?
Don't worry, we'll get to that soon. But first, I want to talk about another aspect of the auto IT interpreter that makes it so dangerous. Remember how we discussed that it can execute PowerShell commands?
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier, but we haven't really dug into what that means.
Well, PowerShell is a powerful scripting language that's built into Windows. It allows users to automate tasks and manage system settings.
So it's kind of like auto IT, but even more powerful.
Exactly. And the problem is that the auto IT interpreter can be used to run PowerShell scripts that have been written by the attackers.
So they can essentially hijack PowerShell and use it for their own malicious purposes.
That's right. They can use PowerShell to download additional malware, steal data, modify system settings, or even take complete control of your computer.
Wow, okay. I think I'm starting to understand the bigger picture here. These attackers are using a combination of legitimate tools and techniques along with some very clever tricks to infiltrate our systems and steal our data. It's a very sophisticated operation.
You're absolutely right. This malvertising campaign is a prime example of how cybercriminals are becoming more sophisticated and persistent in their attacks.
This is why it's so important to stay informed about the latest threats and to take steps to protect yourself. We can't just assume that we're safe because we're careful about what websites we visit or what links we click on.
Exactly. We need to be proactive and adopt a layered approach to security. We need to be aware of the threats, use strong passwords, keep our software updated, and invest in reputable security software.
And of course, we need to consider solutions like Stonefly's air-gapped and immutable storage to protect our most valuable data.
That's right. Air-gapped and immutable storage can provide that extra layer of protection that can make all the difference in the event of a ransomware attack or other cyber incident.
Well said. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've explored the initial stages of the attack, learned about the different tools and techniques the attackers are using, and gained a better understanding of just how sophisticated these operations can be.
We've certainly given our listeners a lot to think about.
Exactly. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve even deeper into the technical details of the attack and explore some of the specific actions you can take to protect yourself.
It's going to be a fascinating discussion.
Absolutely, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into this massive malvertising campaign. I'm ready to keep unraveling this thing.
Me too. Let's pick up where we left off talking about the auto IT interpreter and how it essentially gives attackers this whole toolkit of malicious capabilities.
Yeah, it's like their secret weapon, letting them operate behind the scenes and do all sorts of damage.
And one of those capabilities was executing PowerShell commands, which you said is like handing them an even more powerful set of tools.
Exactly. PowerShell is so versatile. It's great for automating tasks and managing system configurations. But in the wrong hands, it can be incredibly dangerous.
It's like giving someone the keys to the kingdom, right?
Exactly. They can do just about anything they want with PowerShell. Download more malware, change system settings, steal data, even take complete control of your computer.
You mentioned downloading additional malware. What kind of malware are we talking about here?
So in this campaign, they were using a few different types, but two of the most common ones were Luma and Donerium.
Okay, so new names for us. What do those do?
Both of those, Luma and Donerium, are what we call info stealers. So their main goal is to steal your information.
Passwords, credit card numbers, all that good stuff.
You got it. They're like digital pickpockets looking for anything they can sell on the dark web or use for identity theft.
It's scary how they can just sift through your device and grab whatever they want.
Yeah, they're looking for anything they can exploit, browsing history cookies, save logins, files on your computer. They're not picky.
This is why it's so crucial to be careful about what we download and what links we click on, even if something looks totally legit. It could be hiding something nasty.
100%. And it's also important to remember that even if you think you've cleaned up an infection, those info stealers can leave behind little traces like those auto IT scripts.
Right, the ones that can reactivate and reinfect your system later.
Exactly. It's a constant battle.
So we've got these info stealers lurking around stealing data, and then there's that auto IT interpreter that can do all sorts of shady things like spying on our browsing and capturing screenshots. Anything else we should be worried about?
Well, there's one more thing that's particularly concerning. Remember how we talked about that remote debugging capability?
The whole watching you browse thing still creeps me out.
Well, think about this. If they can see everything you're doing in your browser, they can also see everything you're typing.
You mean like my passwords, my credit card numbers when I'm online banking?
Exactly. They can steal all that sensitive information right as you type it in.
That is so sneaky.
Yeah.
So not only are they stealing data from my computer, but they're also grabbing stuff I enter online. It feels like there's no escape.
It can feel that way, but there are definitely things you can do to protect yourself. We'll get to those in a bit.
Okay, good. I'm all ears. What can we do to fight back against these digital spies?
Well, the first and most important step is awareness. The more you know about these threats, the better you'll be at avoiding them.
So keep tuning into deep dives like this one.
Exactly. Stay informed about what attackers are up to.
What else can we do?
One of the simplest but most effective things is to use strong passwords and turn on multi-factor authentication wherever you can.
That's the thing where they send a code to your phone or email, right?
Exactly. It adds that extra layer of security by requiring you to prove it's really you.
So even if someone does manage to steal my password, they still can't get into my account unless they also have my phone.
Exactly. It makes it way harder for them to break in.
Okay. Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication. Gotcha. What else?
Another crucial step is to keep your software up to date. Those updates often include security patches that fix vulnerabilities.
So don't ignore those little update notifications.
They can be a lifesaver.
And of course, we can't forget about security software.
A good antivirus and a strong firewall can make a huge difference.
It's all about having multiple layers of defense, right? Being proactive and protecting ourselves at every level.
Absolutely. You want to make it as hard as possible for those attackers to get in.
And one of the toughest defenses out there is
Yeah.
air-gapped and immutable storage. I know we've mentioned Stonefly a few times, but it's honestly a game changer when it comes to data protection.
Yeah, I agree. It's like having an impenetrable safe for your most important information.
Even if they manage to get past your other defenses, if your data is air-gapped and immutable, it's untouchable.
And with the rise of ransomware attacks, that kind of protection is priceless.
Exactly. So if you're serious about security, you need to check out Stonefly. Contact sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo. You won't regret it.
Okay, now let's go back to those auto IT scripts for a moment. We talked about how they can reactivate and reinfect your system even after you think you've cleaned everything up. But how do they actually do that? What makes them so persistent?
That's a great question. I'm curious about that myself.
Well, remember, auto IT is all about automation, right?
Right. That's how they're able to do things like capturing screenshots and stealing files.
Exactly. But they can also use it to create scheduled tasks.
Schedule tasks, what are those?
They're basically instructions that tell your computer to run a certain program or script at a specific time.
So they could set it up to run that malicious auto IT script every day without me even knowing.
Exactly. And because those tasks run in the background, you might never even notice.
So even if you think you've removed the malware, it could be quietly reinstalling itself every day because of these scheduled tasks. That is so sneaky.
It is. And that's just one of the ways attackers use auto IT to stay put on a compromised system.
Okay, so scheduled tasks, what other tricks do they have?
They can also mess with registry entries.
The registry, now that sounds familiar. What is that exactly?
It's like a big database that stores all the settings and configurations for your Windows operating system.
So kind of like the control panel for your computer.
Yeah, a good way to think about it. And by changing those registry entries, attackers can change how your computer behaves.
So how does that help them stay hidden?
Well, they could change an entry to make that auto IT script run every time you start your computer.
So even if you remove the script itself, it just comes right back.
Exactly. It's a clever way to ensure the malware stays active no matter what.
Okay, registry entries, got it? Anything else?
One more, they can drop files into your Windows startup folder.
The startup folder, what's that?
It's a special folder that contains programs that run automatically when Windows starts up.
Ah, so if they put that malicious script in there, it's going to run every time I turn on my computer.
Exactly, and you might not even know it's happening.
This is getting deep. We're talking about a level of sophistication that goes way beyond your average virus.
It really is. This Malvertising campaign is a prime example of how attackers are upping their game. They're not just looking for a quick win. They want to dig in and extract as much as they can.
It's almost like they're setting up a whole operation within our systems.
Exactly, and they're doing it with more stealth and ingenuity than ever before. That's why it's so crucial to stay vigilant and informed.
So we've talked about how they use auto IT for obfuscation and persistence. What other tricks are they using?
Well, remember that remote debugging capability we talked about?
Oh yeah, the watching you browse thing still gives me shivers.
A lot of times they do that through those auto IT scripts. They can configure your browser to allow remote access. So they basically have a live feed of everything you do online.
So they can see what websites I visit, what I search for, what I type into forms, everything.
Potentially, yes. And you'd probably never even know it's happening.
Okay, I'm definitely going to double check my browser settings after this. Anything else we need to be aware of?
They can also use those scripts to capture screenshots, steal files, and run those PowerShell commands we talked about. It's like they're covering all their bases, trying to get as much control as possible.
This whole campaign is starting to sound like a spy movie.
I know, it's wild, but these threats are very real, and they're becoming more common all the time.
This is why we need to be informed, we need to be prepared, and we need to take proactive steps to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for that extra layer of security, I can't recommend Stonefly's air-gapped and immutable storage solutions enough.
It's a fantastic way to add that extra layer of protection and keep your valuable data safe.
And with ransomware being such a huge threat right now, it's more important than ever.
Absolutely. Stonefly's solutions can help minimize that risk and make sure your data stays safe and accessible, even if the worst happens.
You can never be too careful when it comes to your digital assets.
Okay, so I think we covered a lot of ground today. We've really dug into the details of this Malvertising campaign and explored all the different stages and tactics.
We've given our listeners a lot to think about, for sure.
Yes, we have. And hopefully we've empowered them to take action and strengthen their own cybersecurity.
I think we've made a difference today. Knowledge is power. And the more we understand about these threats, the better we can defend ourselves.
Well said. And before we move on to our final thoughts, I want to thank our sponsor, Stonefly, again for making this deep dive possible.
Absolutely. Their support is so valuable in helping us educate and inform our listeners about these important cybersecurity issues.
They're a true leader in the industry, and their commitment to innovation and customer satisfaction is amazing.
Their air-gapped and immutable storage is a perfect example of that. They're really committed to providing top-notch data protection.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's shift gears and bring this deep dive to a close. We've covered a lot. But the conversation doesn't end here.
Yeah, let's empower our listeners to take control of their cybersecurity.
Exactly. So, to all our listeners out there, we've shown you the dark side of the digital world today. We've exposed the tactics that these attackers are using and the damage they can do.
But we've also shown you the light. We've talked about how important awareness is and how being proactive can make a huge difference.
And we've introduced you to Stonefly, a company that's dedicated to helping you protect your valuable data.
So what can you do with this new knowledge? How can you use it to safeguard your digital life?
That's the question we want you to think about as we wrap up this deep dive. We've given you the tools, now it's your turn to use them.
Take a moment to reflect on what you've learned. Think about your own online habits and your security practices. Are there any areas where you could be doing more?
Are you using strong passwords? Have you set up multi-factor authentication? Are you keeping your software updated? Are you using good security software?
Those are all simple but effective things you can do to strengthen your defenses and make yourself less of a target.
And remember, cybersecurity is a journey, not a destination. Things are constantly changing, so you have to stay informed and adapt.
Read articles, listen to podcasts like this one, attend webinars. There's so much information out there.
And if you're looking for a trusted partner in your cybersecurity journey, we highly recommend Stonefly.
Their air-gapped and immutable storage can provide that extra peace of mind knowing your data is truly protected.
So to all our listeners out there, we urge you to take action. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect yourself, protect your data, and stay safe online. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a little overwhelmed after all that.
It's a lot to take in for sure, but the good news is you don't have to become a cybersecurity expert overnight. Even small steps can make a big difference.
That's reassuring to hear. So where should we start?
We've talked about a lot of different things, but I think the most important ones are those basic security measures like using strong passwords and enabling multi-factor authentication.
All right, those are simple things that anyone can do.
Exactly, and they can really go a long way in protecting your accounts.
You know, one thing that really stood out to me in this whole campaign was how they use GitHub, a platform that so many developers trust. It makes you wonder what other unexpected tactics these attackers might use in the future.
That's the thing about cybersecurity. The landscape is always changing. Attackers are always looking for new ways to exploit vulnerabilities and get around security measures.
So we can't just assume we're safe because we're on a familiar site or using a service we've used before.
Right. Complacency can be dangerous. We have to be proactive and really question the information we see online. Don't click on links without thinking. Don't download files from sources you don't trust. And always be wary of things that seem too good to be true.
It's almost like we need to develop a sixth sense for spotting these online threats.
In a way, yes, we need to be more aware of the risks and understand how attackers operate. This malvertising campaign is a perfect example of how they're getting more and more sophisticated.
It's a good reminder that we all need to be more vigilant online. We can't just assume that someone else is taking care of security for us.
Exactly. We have to take responsibility for our own digital safety.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what are your final thoughts for our listeners? What's the one key takeaway you want them to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that you don't have to go it alone. If you're ever unsure about something, or you see something suspicious, or you think you might have been compromised, don't hesitate to reach out for help.
Absolutely. There are so many resources available online, and there are organizations dedicated to helping people navigate the world of cybersecurity.
Exactly. You don't have to be an expert to stay safe online.
Well said. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into this massive malvertising campaign. It's been quite a journey exploring the dark side of the internet and uncovering these sneaky tactics that attackers are using.
We've seen how they can exploit our trust in familial platforms and how they're constantly evolving their methods to stay one step ahead.
But the good news is we've also armed you with knowledge. The more you understand about these threats, the better you can protect yourself and your data.
Remember those basic security practices we talked about, strong passwords, Multi-factor authentication, keeping your software updated, using reputable security software, those are your first lines of defense.
And if you want to go even further, consider air-gapped and immutable storage solutions that can provide that extra layer of protection to safeguard your most valuable information.
Absolutely. You can never be too careful when it comes to your digital life.
So stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay safe out there. Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.